Tribbles used to be cute and cuddly before Star Trek changed them. Tribbles were originally cute and cuddly little balls of fluff before Star Trek kept changing them. Tribbles famously made their Star Trek debut in Star Trek, the original series Season 2, Episode 15, The Trouble with Tribbles, when Captain James T. Kirk William Shatner and his USS Enterprise crew encounter them aboard a space station. When LT Urua Nichelle Nichols brings one of the little creatures up to the Enterprise, one Tribble quickly turns into thousands of Tribbles with truly hilarious results. Tribbles emit a pleasant cooing sound when held by most humanoids aside from Klingons, producing a tranquilizing effect on human nervous system in particular. Tribbles have appeared in numerous Star Trek television shows and movies, both in the background and as central plot points. Star Trek Deep Space Nine even revisited the trouble with Tribbles in the excellent Season 5 episode, Trials and Tribulations. Although Tribbles were a nuisance to the United Federation of Planets, they were a true menace to the Klingons, who destroyed the Tribble homeworld sometime in the late 23rd century. Star Trek revealed Tribbles were changed by a Starfleet officer's dumb mistake. Star Trek Short Trek Season 2, Episode 2, The Trouble with Edward revealed more about the origin of the Tribble seen in Star Trek, the original series. In the 2250s, a foolish Starfleet officer aboard the USS Cabot named LT. Edward Larkin H. John Benjamin hatched a plan to turn Tribbles into a viable food source. When Larkin first found the Tribbles, the creatures bred extremely slowly. Wanting to make Tribbles a quickly replenishing source of food, Larkin proposed his plan to genetically alter the Tribbles to make them breed faster. Captain Lynn Lucero Rosa Salazar raised several moral objections to Larkin's plan, questioning whether the Tribbles were intelligent. As Larkin was dismissive of her concerns and could not provide a clear answer to her inquiry, she ordered him to halt the project. Larkin kept working on it anyway, modifying the Tribbles with his own DNA. His modifications worked far too well, and Tribbles soon overran the Cabot, forcing the crew to abandon ship. Larkin refused to leave the ship and was killed when the Cabot was destroyed, but his modified Tribbles found their way into Klingon space, where they continued to wreak havoc. Another genetically altered Tribble popped up in Star Trek, Picard Season 3 among the many Easter eggs glimpsed at Daystrom Station. In Picard Season 3, Episode 6, The Bounty, Captain Will Riker Jonathan Frakes, Captain Worf Michael Dorn, and Commander Raffi Musiker Michelle Hurd transported to Daystrom Station in search of answers regarding a recent attack on Starfleet. When Raffi wondered what Starfleet stored at Daystrom Station, Worf replied, Section 31's most nefarious table scraps. One of these so-called table scraps included an aggressive new kind of Tribble. The Tribble was kept in a glass cage aboard the station, and it violently attacked the glass when Worf approached. Tribbles have always reacted negatively to Klingons, but this attacked Tribble displayed at least 5 separate mouths, each with multiple rows of very sharp teeth. Riker joked that Worf was a mighty Klingon taken aback by the even mightier attacked Tribble, but this genetically modified Tribble was genuinely frightening. It remains unknown what purpose Section 31 planned for their attacked Tribbles, but an army of those creatures would be truly terrifying. Klingons also genetically engineered Tribbles. There was a time not long ago in the grand scope of galactic history when Tribbles were the most beloved creatures in the universe. Soft, purring fuzzballs that shimmered in a spectrum of pastel hues, they were the darlings of the Andromeda pet trade, the stars of interstellar cuddle cafes, and the silent companions of lonely asteroid miners who would cradle them like living pillows under alien moons. Before they were beamed onto the Enterprise, before the Klingons deemed them public enemy number 1, before they were weaponized by fan fiction and meme culture alike, Tribbles were innocent, adorable, peaceful. Then came Star Trek, or more precisely, The Trouble with Tribbles. It started with that single episode, the one where they multiplied uncontrollably over on the ship and were declared a menace. The narrative stuck. Suddenly, everyone thought Tribbles were pests, infestations, biohazards. They became shorthand for cute but catastrophic, and the galactic public never looked at them the same again. But what Star Trek didn't tell you was that the original Tribbles, wild Tribbles, as they were once known, were actually different. They didn't multiply unless they were genuinely happy. That's right. Overpopulation was a sign of deep emotional satisfaction. A contented Tribble might sing a quiet, low purr and produce one baby after a month of joy. But a stressed Tribble? One trapped in the sterile metal corridors of a starship. They'd start reproducing like their lives depended on it, because to them, it did. Stress-induced reproduction. Oh no! And the Federation never bothered to ask. The real tragedy was how the media handled it afterward. Sci-fi tabloids ran headlines like "Galactic Threat," "Tribbles invade Mars pet stores," while black market breeders started making bootleg Tribbles programmed to breed endlessly for profit. Corporations stepped in, releasing safe Tribble variants that came pre-sterilized and color-coded. Pink for children. Silver for collectors. Neon green for parties. The original Tribble? Phased out. Too dangerous. Too real. You ever held an original Tribble? Not the sterile, factory clone version, but the kind that nuzzled your palm like it understood your sadness? They had a way of syncing their purring with your heartbeat. A kind of natural empathy. Tribbles didn't speak, but they listened better than any therapist in the Alpha Quadrant. But after Star Trek, people stopped trusting them. Entire planets banned their import. The last wild colonies on Duran 6 were relocated under government orders. The Tribble Conservation League, bless their three-legged volunteers, did what they could, but the damage was done. The narrative was written. The meme had become the message. Even the Ferengis started capitalizing on the myth. One of them launched a holo-park called Tribbles of Terror, where guests were overwhelmed by animatronic Tribbles and forced to escape by warp pods. Children screamed. Adults laughed nervously. No one remembered the real creatures behind the simulation. It wasn't just image damage. Tribbles started going extinct in the wild. Their environment, a delicate mix of moss-covered caves and low-frequency crystal beds, was forgotten, overwritten by the false lore of reproduction rates and comedic chaos. The last wild Tribble was spotted 8 years ago by a retired xenobotanist who lived alone on a floating observatory. He claimed it sang to him in his dreams. They called him senile. Now there's a push, albeit a small one, to reclaim the truth. A few influencers on Subspastok have started the #TribbleSoustobacute movement. They post vintage vids of Tribbles in slow motion, snuggling with kids, chirping softly in the arms of poets. There's even a holographic scene titled Pre-Trek Tribble, curated by an underground archivist who insists the original Tribble DNA held emotional resonance frequencies. Crazy, right? But maybe not. Maybe we owe it to them, to the real Tribbles, to remember what they were before we turned them into a joke. Before television reduced them to a plot device. Before we let fear and ratings rewrite their biology. Tribbles used to be cute and cuddly. They used to heal. They used to mean something. And maybe, if we listen closely, they still do. Want this styled like a fake blog post or with images next? Comedic chaos. The last wild Tribble was spotted 8 years ago by a retired xenobotanist who lived alone on a floating observatory. He claimed it sang to him in his dreams. They called him senile. Now there's a push, albeit a small one, to reclaim the truth. A few influencers on Subspastok have started the #TribbleSoustobacute movement. They post vintage vids of Tribbles in slow motion, snuggling with kids, chirping softly in the arms of poets. There's even a holographic zine titled Pre-Trek Tribble, curated by an underground archivist who insists the original Tribble DNA held emotional resonance frequencies. Crazy, right? But maybe not.